It's very adventurous and it's very exciting, and it's also extremely painful at times. And that pain we could sum up, if you like, in the one word or the one phrase, you know, that we each live with a sense of separation. So the suggestion from here is both a very simple one and also one which is really difficult or maybe even impossible for the mind to understand. The suggestion here is that that sense of separation or duality or two-ness, living in a separate world as a person, that sense can simply collapse. And if it collapses, then we could say what is revealed or what is seen is what we're here to talk about tonight. What is seen then is non-duality. And just as duality means two-ness, non-duality means not two. Oneness, if you like, or more accurately, not two. So the suggestion here is that the apparent duality of me living in a world with choice and free will and purpose and meaning and a past and a future, that can simply collapse. And if it does collapse, then all that is left then is the recognition, if you like, that that adventure of duality was always a kind of illusion. It was always, it was kind of real in a way, but it was also unreal. And that we could say more fundamental to that or underlying that, what is simply the case is there is simply everything that is apparently happening. And that includes the appearance of a character here called Richard and a character there called Emerson or Kate or John or William or Elizabeth or whoever. So there's an appearance of a character here, but the suggestion from this chair here is that the personhood of that character can be seen through. And if it is seen through, it may be, it doesn't have to be, but it may be one hell of a shock, because if the personhood is seen through, if the kind of reality of the individual is seen through, it will tend to take with it all sorts of things that the person will have greatly valued up till then, like meaning, purpose, goal, the importance of the past, the importance of the future, the idea that this is somehow on a journey, maybe a meaningful journey, maybe not, but on a journey from birth to death. So there tends to be a collapse in meaning, purpose, and also, rather fundamentally for a lot of people, just the whole idea that there is somebody here who has something very, very precious called free will, which they are able to exercise. So that can also be a tremendous shock for, you know, this individual to have felt that to some degree they have been able to be the author of their own life. You know, I have been able to make choices about my life. You have been able to make choices about your life. That perhaps most catastrophically of all for some individuals, that can simply collapse, and it can be seen that this was always, if you like, without meaning, without purpose, without choice. I remember using words very like this at a live meeting once, and somebody just looked at me from the audience and said, "Richard, that is one of the most depressing things I have ever heard." And as I apologized to them for being so depressing, they said, no, it's great as well. So by a person who feels themselves to be living a meaningful life, this may be heard as depressing, it might be heard as a shock. There's a very, very strong tendency for this communication to be rejected by a lot of individuals. If any of you in this audience have tried to start a conversation with a random stranger in a bar, you know, if you've gone up to a random stranger in a bar and said, you know, you don't exist as an individual, you might have come across some of that resistance. So this is often heard with a great deal of resistance. And yet the suggestion from here is that even even a split-second glimpse of this reality can just change everything, and that when it's seen, nothing can ever be the same again. So that's my kind of pitch, if you like. That's my introductory talk. Now, before the recording started, I had a brief conversation with Emerson, and Emerson knows something about the situation here which nobody else does, which is that I come to these meetings these days, because they're on Zoom rather than live. I come to these meetings these days with what I call my magic hat full of questions. It's a genuine, real hat, and the questions in it are genuine questions in the sense that they're questions that people have sent in to me over, you know, many years of my giving talks and writing books and so forth. And as a special request for Emerson, before we throw this open, he asked me just to select a couple of these questions at random and have a go at answering the questions that I've posed, other people have posed for me, but, you know, I've kind of got here. So I'm going to, Emerson's in control, so I'm going to accede to this request. I'm going to give into it. And I don't even know what they are yet. I haven't looked at them. I just picked a couple of pieces of paper out of the hat before the meeting started. I'm feeling that in about 10 seconds time, I might bitterly regret agreeing to this, but nevertheless, here goes. Let's have a go. Okay, so there's the piece of paper. The first question is there a mind? If not, what are thoughts? Okay, I got off lightly with that one, because I think that's a fairly obvious and a fairly common question to come up. Is there a mind? Fairly simple answer, no. No, there is no mind. There may seem to be a mind, and we could say that's just what it's like to be apparently a person living in separation. One of the great shocks that may be seen when separation is seen through is that I do not have a mind. Not only do I not have a mind, there is no me who could have a mind. In any case, you do not have a mind. I'm not being insulting there. I'm simply saying you do not have a mind. And indeed, even worse, there is no you who could have a mind. So the question goes on, if not, what are thoughts? Well, thoughts is energy thinking. Thoughts is, we could say, oneness thinking. And it's because of the thought stream, we could say, that there seems to be a mind. You know, we could say that for most of us, not all of us, but for most of us living in separation, the kind of flow of thoughts is so strong, is so powerful, is so energized that it creates a kind of impression that there's something solid behind it. And we call that thing that seems to be behind it the mind. And it is one of the shocking things when this is seen, to realize that, you know, I do not have a mind. I have never had a mind. I cannot lose my mind because it did not exist. But what there is this thought stream, this which includes impressions and sensations and feelings. So, yeah, there's, for Emerson, that's our first hat question. And here's the second one, because I was asked to do two. Oh yeah, this is interesting. A teacher has told me that until I stop over intellectualizing about all my experiences, I will never realize liberation. Do you think this is true? Okay, so again, there's a very simple answer to that. No, absolutely not. No, it's the sort of thing that teachers say. And it's one of the reasons maybe it's quite a good idea to be wary of teachers around this stuff. If anybody calls themselves a teacher of non-duality, I would probably head in the opposite direction from them, you know, fairly quickly. This can't be taught. if I had something to teach about this, I would be doing it, and I would probably be driving a much, much more expensive car. Yeah, you can't, just as you can't, how can I put this? Just as you can't, as it were, bring the seeing of non-duality on, neither can you do anything which will resist it. So any instruction or injunction that you get from a teacher or a guru or from some kind of spiritual path or from a religious teacher or whatever that says that you must do this and this and this and you mustn't do that and that and that, I would say, no, just ignore that. It's just, you know, if anyone sees themselves as a teacher, then they have to teach. And if you teach, you have to give instruction, and you have to give the instructions in such a way that whatever happens, you will come out smelling of roses and looking as if you're right. So not over-intellectualize as much as you like, it won't be you doing it. In other words, over-intellectualizing happens or it doesn't. Over-intellectualizing stops or it doesn't. Usually when a teacher of non-duality or spirituality, whatever we want to call it, usually if they do teach things, they'll have a kind of fail-safe in there whereby they'll be able to blame you when it doesn't work, and they'll be able to blame you by saying something like, you didn't try hard enough, you weren't pure enough, you weren't dedicated enough. In other words, here's me with my teaching, now it's your fault that it didn't work. Give me a bit more money and then maybe we can adjust it so it will work. I'm just going to throw in one more little thing here, and then I'll stop and throw it open. I was actually watching somebody. I was watching somebody being interviewed a few weeks ago, and they kind of invite people to learn what I will describe as a fairly simple self-inquiry practice from them, and they were making what I would consider to be huge claims for this, about how this would kind of almost inevitably bring about the seeing of what we're talking about here. And one of the things they threw into their description of this is that the most important characteristic in the seeker who is doing this practice that they will invite the seeker to do, the most important thing is determination, is their determination. That is the most important thing. Now, when I hear something like that, my hackles rise. I don't have a lot of hair left, but I feel like pulling some of it out. I'm very resistant to that kind of message, because it feels to me like that is typically what, you know, the teacher, the person who sees themselves as a teacher will do. They will put some sort of characteristic on you, and they will say, you know, that is the most important thing. So therefore, if the practice which is being given to you doesn't go anywhere, it's your fault because you didn't have enough determination in this case. It could be determination, devotion, sincerity, desire for truth, whatever that is. It could be any of these things, but you know, I'm very, very wary of any communication like that. No. When the teacher tells you to be more devoted, to stop over-intellectualizing, to spend more time meditating, to whatever it is, I would say, no, let's just ignore all of that.
Thank you, Richard. We have a whole bunch of questions here coming from Facebook, from Non-Duality.LIVE, YouTube, Nothing Media, YouTube. And the first question from Facebook is what is seen just God, in quotation? Is what is seen just God?
If you like, if that works for you, fine. Yeah, I mean, call this whatever you like. Call it call it oneness, call it nothing and everything, call it unconditional love, call it custard if you like. If God works for you, well, fine. It may depend on, our individual culture and so forth. I tend to avoid that word. I think particularly in a Western tradition, it's very, very difficult to separate the word God from ideas and beliefs which are absolutely and totally and inescapably dualistic. And so I don't tend to use that word. I mean, if the culture you're coming from or your associations with the word God maybe have more to do with, with the Eastern traditions, and maybe the Buddhist tradition, although in Buddhism they tend to avoid the word God as well. They tend to, that might work for you. The problem in the West is that if you think of the Abrahamic religion, if you think of, mostly Christianity and Islam, an absolutely core, an absolutely fundamental foundation stone of most of the interpretations of those religions is utterly and eternally dualistic, because the concept is that there is God who can be approached and can be worshipped, but can never be, as it were, merged with. I mean, if you look into the more mystical traditions of Christianity and Islam, that may not apply, but for all intents and purposes, from a Western perspective, it's really difficult to disassociate the idea of God from absolute, total dualism, absolute duality. There is you and there's God, and the best that you can do is to be allowed to approach God and worship God, but never to merge. However, having said that, all I'm really saying there is that those kind of references don't work for me, so I tend to avoid them. But if they work for you, that's absolutely fine. I'd be absolutely fine. And I meet people who those kind of reference points do work for them, and they value them, and that's great. I think I'd just like to sort of add, in case, there's a kind of subtext there. I think what I'm trying to say also, you can't get this wrong. I mean, if you ask me a question and I kind of go, oh, blah, 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 I really don't like that, it doesn't make it wrong. You cannot get this wrong. I mean, you can't get it right either. You and I can't get it right, but we cannot get it wrong. One of the things that I frequently say in my talks and meetings is that if there's any possibility of relaxation, then relaxation is great. And maybe hearing that we can't get this wrong might produce a little bit of relaxation. We don't have to try at this, because as we can't get it right or wrong, we might as well relax.
Thank you. There's a question here from Facebook, from YouTube, sorry, from Mark Harris. Given all you have said, why talk about it? Has it collapsed for you, Richard?
First part of the question, why talk about it? Why not? That's all I can say. There's no reason to talk about it whatsoever. There's also no reason not to talk about it. I hope it's not going to sound contradictory if I now go on to say that with or without a reason, some of us simply enjoy this. So if you kind of want a reason, so I am now going to contradict myself, well, because for some of us, some of the time it's enjoyable. Another way of putting that is simply there's no one here talking about it. There's no one there listening to it. There's just an energy that arises, non-duality for no reason, somehow, sometimes seems to like to hear itself talking about itself. That may sound misleading because it sounds as if I'm personalizing something, but again, it doesn't matter. Being misleading doesn't matter, because being misleading is no less helpful and no more helpful than not being misleading. There was another part to that question, was there?
Has it collapsed for you, Richard?
It doesn't collapse for anyone. No, it hasn't collapsed for me. It doesn't collapse for anyone because there isn't anyone. I mean, all the clearest way I can put this is simply it's seen or it's not seen. And if it's seen by no one. So no person ever sees this. No individual ever sees this. Richard has not seen this. Nevertheless, it may be seen.
Thank you. I have a couple of comments here, and I'll get to William and Eric in a moment. David and Elaine goes, hi, Richard. No questions are arising, but wanted to say hello and always lovely to see and hear you. Love from us, both to you and Dawn.
It's lovely to hear from you as well. Lots of love to you both. We're looking forward, hopefully, to some live meetings in the fairly near future.
There's a whole bunch of people here saying hello. There's greetings from Anders and Dan. Go ahead, William, and unmute yourself.
Hi, Richard.
Hello, William.
I don't have an explicit question, but I just wanted to talk to you. It feels to me like there's nothing else at the other than non-duality, like nothing else will ever work. But the thing that I find so frustrating.
Sorry, can I just interrupt and say non-duality won't work either? It's not, you know, we want something. You know, we want to. It's natural that we want to get something from this. You will not get anything from this. This is not as Tony sometimes puts it. You know, the self is a businessman, and this is not a business deal.
I think the problem with that is I'm not disagreeing with what you've said, but it feels to me like I am getting so much from this. And it is a roller coaster, like there's like awful devastation that happens. But when there's a resonance or an openness or a glimpse, I guess the me claims that like this is happening to me. I'm getting some relief here.
Sure. Yeah, sure. That's natural and fine. Not a problem, is it?
No, but then I want to see what you're saying, which is I won't get it, which I can't make sense out of that.
You will never. You can't. It's worse. I mean, I feel like fairly okay. The next thing I'm going to say I feel okay about, the one after that, no, I'm quite happy to sit here and say you will never see it. You will never see it, William. Give up. If only you could give up, but you can't. But the next thing I'm going to say is, you know, I haven't seen it. I don't see it. Richard does not see it. Nevertheless, it may be seen. And that is a mystery until it isn't. I mean, when it's seen, it is still a mystery. It's the biggest mystery of all. It's the only mystery in town and outside the town because it's everywhere as well. But nevertheless, you know, you will not see that mystery. I have not seen that mystery. No one, I mean this in both ways, no one will ever see this mystery, but I hear that the other way as well. You know, no one will see this mystery. No one will see this mystery, but no one will see this mystery. I hope that kind of makes sense.
Completely. Oh, well, I get, yeah, I get what you're saying.
There's nothing here for William or Richard.
Well, the thing I was going to ask was when you were saying that I won't get anything from this, or you said non-duality won't work. What I was going to say is the thing that's so frustrating about this is that it's impossible to predict what's going to happen or where this is going to go. Like you sometimes quote Ramana Maharshi about the head in the tiger's mouth, and you've got no idea if the tiger's going to be playing around with you or bite your head off straight away. And when this seems so intense, all the stuff that seems to be going on around that sense of me, I just want to know when it's going to be over. But yeah,
it's natural. I mean, that's what it's like to be, you know, that's what it's like to live in separation, to be an individual, to be a person, you know, whatever phrase we want to use. Of course, it's just absolutely. What can I say about that other than raise my hands and perhaps remember the great mantra, helpless, hopeless, and meaningless. You know, you are helpless, it is hopeless. and everything is meaningless. And how wonderful is that? Maybe that'll be heard as depressing, as some people hear it. Maybe it'll be heard as wonderful. And maybe, as the person who commented on that mantra the first time it came into this, what isn't a mind here, maybe it'll be heard as both depressing and wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, of course, we can't help living in a story. You know, the individual lives in a story, and it's pretty obvious. You know, just sit down in front of, you know, in front of EastEnders any night or whatever. You know, it's obvious we want to know what's going to come next, and what's going to come next, and then, and finally, is he going to get the girl, or, you know, die in a blaze of glory, or, you know, it's just natural. It's what it is to apparently be human.
Thanks very much, Richard.
Okay, William.
Eric, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Eric.
So I've come across this idea recently, repeatedly, that well, at first I heard of it in the reference of, to meditation, where sometimes in meditation we try to seek a stillness of mind, but other times in meditation we become aware that all contents of mind are it, so-called, like there's no avoiding any of what arises in mind. And to kind of generalize that to life, and what we're talking about here, I have had this feeling like anxiety and depression and anger and jealousy, all of those emotions, I don't want to accept them as part of the me. But with this idea, all of those emotions and everything else in between is all a part of the experience that arises. And there's no ownership of it. It's just a part of totality. And yeah, I find that this allows me to sort of not wrestle with it a little bit, but I also feel that it's fleeting. Like I'm working with a couple of guides who try to help me see this, and I get glimpses where I feel a release of this like sense of the me, but it comes back and it looks at those emotions that I don't want, and it notices that they're present, and it says, well, this can't be it. And I just notice this loop of wanting my life to be a constant, a state of constant bliss or something. And I'm trying to rid myself of that, I suppose you could say.
You're trying to rid yourself of
this desire for life to be a state of constant bliss.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as long as you're trying to rid yourself of that, then that's going to go on happening. I mean, you know, it's possible that instead of that, a state of relaxation might occur, or it's possible that a state of relaxation might occur, you know, some of the apparent time that seems to be passing. But ultimately, you know, if it makes sense to the individual, it makes sense to the person. You know, I'm suffering, I don't want to suffer. Of course, you know, bliss is lovely. Even the slightest glimpse of bliss is lovely. So, of course, why shouldn't I want to have more of that? Of course, it's absolutely natural for the person, the individual, of course. But it's possible that, you know, that can be seen through, and then it's possible that it might be noticed that what arises is simply what arises. Some of it's more pleasurable, some of it's less pleasurable.
Yeah, and would you say that once that is seen, there's simply a not taking ownership of which arises?
You mean when this is seen, when separation's seen through?
Yeah.
There are absolutely no rules. none whatsoever, but there are tendencies. And so what I would say is, yes, there's quite a strong tendency for what you just said to happen. In other words, the sense of ownership is likely to collapse or diminish or lessen. Feeling, since you mentioned anger, did you mention another feeling? I can't remember.
Anxiety, jealousy.
Yeah, so let's call that fear. Let's sort of, go for the heart of it and call it anxiety, fear. So uncomfortable feelings like sorrow, anger, and fear. I mean, they may diminish, but there's also a tendency that in a way they can get stronger because they can become more raw. One of the things that you could say that the separated person is very good at is kind of damping down the full force of feelings and turning them into what I call, and some other people call, sort of like a more neurotic version of themselves. So, and the problem with neurotic versions of anger and fear and sadness is that they tend to kind of perpetuate themselves and last for a very long time. So like a neurotic version of anger would be irritation, say. A neurotic version of fear would be anxiety. And the problem with irritation, as opposed to anger, is it can go on for a very long time. I mean, I've come across people in my life, probably most people watching this may be able to think of somebody who seems to be capable of staying irritable for days, weeks, months, and sometimes even years on end. It's very, very difficult for somebody to stay angry for days, weeks, months, or years on end. It's just too much energy. And so sometimes what happens is that there's a kind of a loss of neurotic energy when this is seen. And so instead of experiencing these kind of attenuated feelings like irritation or anxiety, for a long time, we just get a much briefer period, if you like, of, the full force of that feeling. So feelings can actually, including uncomfortable things, can become stronger when this is seen. And that can, that can sound like something that the person doesn't want, but actually, if that happens, it turns out to be something that, oh yeah, actually, yeah, maybe I'd rather settle for 5 minutes of anger than a week of irritation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you. So rather than with effort releasing my control of this and allowing a process of liberation to unfold, it would more be like the constricted energy simply dissipates of its own accord, or it doesn't.
Yes, absolutely. And I can't paraphrase what you just started with there, but as you were saying, I was thinking, well, the obvious comment to make on that is you can't do that anyway. So you don't really have that choice that you just put to us, which I can't paraphrase because my memory's not good enough, but you don't have that choice anyway. Right. What will unfold. But however, if as a result, that's a really dangerous phrase for me to use. If just out of nowhere, that energy system happens to kind of, become more relaxed about letting whatever the feelings that are there flow in a kind of natural way, yeah, that's much more bearable. I mean, that's an insight which is shared with, kind of quite a lot of good psychotherapy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Richard. I appreciate it.
Okay, Eric.
Thank you, Eric. I have a whole bunch of questions here from YouTube. The first one is from Dan Shaw. Dan asked, can you explain why emotions are only experienced in my reality? Therefore, there exists a separate viewpoint that is unique to individuals.
No, I can't explain that. It's a really obvious and natural question. It's a question that comes up, a lot. It's a really natural question for the mind to ask. The mind is very, very, very good at coming up with, objections to this. We could say that, you know, a lot of minds, I was going to say most minds, a lot of minds are pretty terrified of this communication, because really, if what's being said here is heard, it absolutely dethrones the mind. It really does. It overturns the mind. It actually reveals the mind for what it really is, which is a complete illusion. As I've already said this evening, there is no such thing as a mind. There's just a kind of flow. A flow of thoughts, perceptions, sensations, and so forth. So some of the things that are said here, they are absolutely and totally insulting to the mind. They are counter-logical, completely counter-logical. There is no way they can be justified to the mind. The only thing that I can say in defense of non-duality, not that non-duality needs my defense, of course not. You know, the only thing I can say is that what is being communicated here is an attempt at a description. It is not a rationalization. There is no way that I can justify intellectually or rationally what is being said here. And believe me, sometimes that pains me as much as it pains some other people. You know, I mean, I've kind of got a fairly intellectual background. I've sort of, you know, read some books, and, you know, I kind of, you know, value the mind. I value the intellect and all of that. And, you know, when I as a worn out spiritual seeker first came across non-duality, I mean, I found a lot of what I was listening to a real insult to the mind. And I came up with some pretty clever questions, you know, to challenge this. And those pretty clever questions got me precisely nowhere. I used to use this image, I'll throw it in, it may make sense to some people. You know, I used to sort of ask questions about this, and I felt like I was kind of climbing up a mountain, and I was banging a peg into the mountain. That was my question. And then I'd hear the answer, and the answer would allow me to haul myself up a little bit up, higher up the mountain of knowing or not knowing. I don't know how to put it. You know, the mountain which would eventually get me to, you know, the seeing of non-duality. And the problem with this was that I'd bang the peg in by asking my question. The answer would come back to me. The peg would fall out of the mountain, and I'd just fall on my arse back to the bottom of the mountain. No matter how many questions, I can't even begin to calculate how many hours after endless hours of non-duality meetings I sat through. And after all those many hours, I was still precisely at the base of the mountain, with my arse hurting and my mind hurting, and I couldn't work out which was hurting more. So statements that are made here and in other places where non-duality is talked about, like there's no person, there's no mind, there's no mind, there's no space, there's no time, there's just this. No. The question's an obvious one. You know, I'm sitting in my room over here asking this question. You're sitting in your room over there answering it. You know, what are you going to say about that then, eh? How does that work? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You know, you follow the mind in this, and it will lead you, I don't know whether to say round in circles or through a maze for the rest of your life. In 60 years' time, your mind can still be arguing with this, or the mind might just go, okay, I surrender, I give up. I'm not saying the second of those possibilities is any better than the first, but it is more relaxing. And although non-duality, seeing non-duality isn't like anything, if it were like anything, it would be like relaxation. I've lost count of the number of times I've said that. Even tonight, never mind, over the last however many apparent years.
I have a question here from Kane. Hi, Richard. in this story, how many apparent people have fallen away from your communication?
I have no idea. And that would be very, very much a story, because of course nobody falls, no apparent person ever falls away anyway. And of course they don't fall away through my communication. They don't fall away through the Shaktipat of some mighty guru. They don't fall away from this or that or the other. But nevertheless, in the story, stories like that do appear. And so from no one, out of nowhere, yeah, I receive emails from people, and people ring me up, or they come up to me at meetings and they say, you know, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, I was reading this book, you know, or I was sitting in a meeting or watching a YouTube, and it might be the apparent me, or it might be, you know, somebody else that they name or whatever. Yeah, of course that happens, and these are stories, and you know, yeah, it's nice to hear them. Yeah, it's lovely in a way, but really there isn't any answer to this question, because of course nobody ever sees this. Nobody collapses. Nobody falls away. But stories around that, you know, are delightful. Yeah.
There's a couple of comments here. There's one here saying, there's just so many of them. You talk beautiful, Richard. Cheers.
Oh, thank you.
Rupert Spira must hate you.
I don't even, well, no, I was going to say, I don't know if Rupert Spira knows my name, but actually we did appear on a panel once, so he probably does.
And then someone commented, all there is pizza.
Oh, yeah.
And Yoso goes, there is no words, meaning, knowing, concepts, not even no thing.
Okay.
And then Anders' comment, I don't know. I think the core of Christianity is non-duality, such as, this is a quote from John 14:20. On the day you will realize that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah. How long have we got? I would say that if you challenge me about this, I might break down, cry, and withdraw it. I don't know. But I would say that at the heart of all religion, there probably is non-duality. It is still detectable even in the world's major religions today. It is still detectable in the esoteric forms. It's very, very, very difficult to detect it in the kind of outward exoteric forms. And one of the problems, this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, so I really need to limit what I say about this. But of course, one of the kind of exoteric, the kind of, the sort of outward world-facing political versions of particularly the Christian and Islamic religions in their various forms, is that this is perceived, seeing of this, any kind of, I'm going to say any kind of mystical seeing as well, although I would not call this a mystical seeing, but any kind of mystical seeing as well is seen as a tremendous threat to the kind of outward forms of Christianity and Islam, which is why if you look at the history of those major religions, they have actually put quite a lot of effort into killing people who've seen this, or killing people who have a mystical apprehension. I think that's a bit of a clue that they don't really like this conversation we're having here. There are, pretending that there's such a thing as history. There have been plenty of times in history when we could not have had this conversation, not without being burnt at the stake. And pretending for the moment that there is such a thing as geography, there are plenty of places on the planet today, right at this minute, where we could not have this conversation without being probably killed, actually. Let's not mince our words. So in a way, it's a great blessing that we live pretending that there are these 4 dimensions, 3 of space and 1 of time. It's a great blessing that we are living in a time where we can have this open conversation. I hope for all of us, and definitely at least for most of us, without any threat to our lives. This communication, you know, is incredibly threatening to the kind of outward forms, the exoteric forms of religion. Why is that? Well, I shan't talk about that for the 2 hours I could. I'll just say something very brief. You know, hopefully it should kind of be obvious, you know, that the seeing of this, what we're talking about, it can arise spontaneously at any moment, in any place, for any apparent individual. In other words, it requires no priests, no imams, no bishops, no popes, no cardinals, no churches, no holy books, no tradition. None of that. If all of that was swept away, if there was some kind of catastrophe, you know, tomorrow, whereby all holy places, all holy scriptures, all history, all knowledge of any holy happenings in the past, if all of that was wiped out tomorrow, the seeing of non-duality would simply arise spontaneously. This doesn't need anything, need nothing to support it, no foundations whatsoever. You know, this is actually the foundation of everything else. You could say that the exoteric, I may regret the sentence I'm about to say, but because it's popped into my head, I'm going to say it. You know, you could say that non-duality is the foundation, you know, for all religions, and that what happened is that religions tend to take this understanding or this seeing and then pervert it and turn it into something which can be used for profit and for power. Going back to, you know, what I was saying earlier about, you know, what other speakers say about how, you know, the ego, the self, the individual person is a business person, is always looking, you know, where can I make a profit? How can I make a profit out of life? We could say that's what the churches and the temples have done with this seeing. They've taken it and they've turned it into something that they can make a profit from. Okay, there's something about this meeting tonight which is bringing out a certain naughtiness in me. I hope I don't go away and regret this later, but if I do, it's too late anyway.
It reminded me of our interview, the one that will never be released.
Oh, right. So maybe
yeah.
Maybe this tonight will never be released either.
It's live right now, Richard. You have
it's being streamed
live.
Very enjoyable naughtiness, Richard.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a bit late to roll back on this now, isn't it? We're just going to have to plow on.
There's a question here from Kane. Can you talk about when Tony said, "I hope you die soon"?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I was what was happening for me is what quite often happens for people. You know, there can be a kind of glimpse of this. We haven't gone into this before, but I think, you know, I'll just throw this out there. If anybody wants me to expand on it, I will, but I'll just leave it simple for now. There can be a kind of 2 different kinds of seeing with this. There can be what's often called, what I call, other people sometimes call, the seeing of emptiness and the seeing of fullness. So there can be like an event in which the seeing, or the emptiness of everything, including the emptiness of this, is seen. And it's a pretty big shock. And the seeing of the fullness of this is not, you know, is not apprehended. I'll come on to that later. If the emptiness of this is seen, but not the fullness, it can leave behind it a person who is in despair. I won't go into why that is at this moment. I will if anybody wants me to, but I'll leave it at that for now. Just take that as read. There's lots of cases of this. Lots of people get a glimpse of this, and then there's a sense of despair. So I was in that period of despair for quite a long time. having, let's say, seen the emptiness in everything. And I was, going along to Tony's meetings, and I was ringing him up and, asking for help, which of course is never forthcoming, because nobody can ever give anyone any help with this. No matter how much some of us may pretend we can, no one actually can. So I'd ring Tony, and he'd be very kind and listen patiently and so forth. And then I'd buttonhole him in tea breaks and after the end of meetings and so forth. And one day I went up to him at the end of the meeting, as usual, in this state of emptiness and despair. And he just gave me a big warm hug, and he just said, "I hope you die soon." And in the context, I mean, I think I knew what he meant. And in the context, I think that probably at least some, if not many, if not all of the people watching this now also know what that means. He was like, he could see in me what I know so many other people experience, just the pain of carrying around the burden of being a person when you've had even the slightest glimpse of being free of that. I mean, the slightest glimpse of being free of that is so delicious, and then after it, there is just this kind of pain, this constant fatigue and pain of still, as it were, carrying around the burden of being a person when you've had a glimpse of freedom. And it was just, I just take it as, that was Tony's very kind way of wishing me well. The best anyone can do with this is wish us well. So yeah, and occasionally, actually, I got an email 2 or 3 days ago from somebody asking me if I could pass on the same blessing to them. So yeah, so for anybody who would like to die soon, I hope that happens.
Thank you so much. I think Michael was up earlier, and then he didn't. I'll get to you, William. Hi, Michael. Michael Markham. There he is. Hi. You're muted there, Michael.
Yes, you're muted, Michael.
Oh, I thought I had that.
No.
Unmute myself. Okay,
you're unmuted right now. You're good.
Oh, good. Is it your belief, Richard, that consciousness / awareness arises in the brain of sentient beings?
Did you? I think you started that sentence by saying, "Is it my belief that?"
I did, yes.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say is it really doesn't matter at all what my belief is. Beliefs are just beliefs. Who cares? There's a character here, there's a character there are lots of other characters. Maybe, I hope there are a few other characters at least watching this, and all of those characters will have beliefs. And if this has been seen partially, or if this has been seen fully, it doesn't really make that much difference to that. There'll still be beliefs, they probably won't be held so strongly. So the first thing I want to say is that on that level, in a sense, what we're talking about here is trivial because it's just belief. Having said that, the question you ask, I find very interesting. So it's nice to engage with it. So, and having given that little preamble, of course, I've forgotten precisely what the question was. So let me just check. Are you basically asking me whether, the scientists and the philosophers sometimes put this, that mental activity or the mind or consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the physical brain, and that's it? Is that what the question is?
Primarily, yes. That's
yeah.
I maybe should have phrased it. It is your brain. Is it your brain's belief, or the brain that you used to think of as yours? Is it?
Let's keep it simple. I mean, basically, does consciousness arise from the physical brain, and is it entirely explained by the existence of the physical brain? When the physical brain dies, consciousness dies. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, let's tackle that one. How long have we got? Okay, Emerson, we can stay on. Just had a message from Emerson saying we can stay on till 2 o'clock tomorrow morning. So that should just
yeah. All day, 24 hours.
The obvious answer is, of course, it's unknowable. It's unknowable, and we could just leave it at that and say, well, it's unknowable, so who cares? However, you know, like many people, I do find this an interesting question, so I'm going to sort of add to it's unknowable, you know, what my best guess is, and my best guess is that the answer is no. My best guess is that consciousness, mind activity, whatever you want to call it, you know, cannot be entirely explained, or will not turn out to be entirely simply a function of physical brains. So in other words, you know, I suspect that physicalism, as they call it, will turn out to be wrong. But, you know, who knows?
Do you have an alternative suggestion as to where the source might be for cognition, for languaging?
It's the same. It's the same as the source for anything. It's, you know, it's oneness, which is just a word to express. You know, ultimately, it cannot be divided up. Ultimately, you know, it's a great function of the mind to divide things up. It's wonderful. It's exciting. It produces lovely, you know, lovely phenomena and all of that. But ultimately, it's a play. Ultimately, it's a kind of play. Ultimately, there is no division. That's what non-duality means. No division. So I love playing with these questions, but it's also maybe to recognize the impenetrable unanswerability of them. Otherwise, we might end up getting a headache.
Is it possible for the objectifying brain to even ponder oneness when its world is composed of nothing but separate objects, or imaginarily separated objects, me and other? Is it even conceivable that the brain could ponder such questions from an objectified perspective?
I'm not sure what you mean by from an objectified perspective.
Me and other, a subject and object world.
All right. Yeah, well, I'm going to take the brain out of this, because I think that raises too many hairs that we could go chasing. And I'm going to talk about the mind instead, because that seems to me a more natural way of putting it. Or, you know, is it possible for the mind to, however you put it? Yes, of course it's possible to, because the mind, if you like, the brain deals in ideas. It's possible to do it endlessly, to speculate endlessly. It's not possible for it to actually reach any meaningful conclusions, which is kind of good in a way, because it means that the intellectual games and the mind games and all the kind of opinion conversations that take place can go on forever. Yeah, it's a great way of passing the time.
Isn't mind just another object in this subject-object world, just another adjective that the brain invents to articulate or try to capture or imagine its own rough brain chatter, the origin of its sense of personal identity? Mind has no, is just as ephemeral as any other object in this world.
Yeah, what I'm really saying is, you see, we're talking about something that doesn't exist, because you know, there is no such thing as a mind. What there is a flow of, let's call it, perceptions. There is simply, you know, you will have heard many, many times in talks like this, people saying things like, you know, there is only what is, there is just whatever's arising, or something. That is an attempt to describe the fact that in a sense, I mean, even in the physical world, you know, the idea of objects is misleading. It's triply, quadruply misleading, if we
Mhm.
talk about what we could call the mental world. So there is no such thing as a mind. It doesn't matter whether we regard it as an object or not. It doesn't matter whether in some way we are objectifying it or not. The fact is that neither we nor the mind exists. What there is an ever-changing, what? An ever-changing series of impressions, and some of those will be some of those are known as thoughts or thinking. And the word thought, you see, one of the troubles with language is we have all these damned nouns, and the problem with a noun is it's names an object. So I say a thought, it sounds like I'm naming an object. I say, oh, I have a mind, you have a mind, it sounds like I'm naming an object. I'm not. There is no object called a thought. There is no object called the mind. What there is an ever-changing process arising in nothing.
Okay, isn't ever-changing process just another attempt to objectify or to grasp or to articulate this what we call ungraspable, but that's just another idea too. Isn't anything that
that's all we can do. That's all we can do. We're having a conversation. That's all we can do in this conversation. In a way, this meeting would be much, I hesitate to use the word truer, but I'm going to use it. In a way, this meeting would be much truer, if you like, to non-duality, whatever that means, if we didn't talk at all. If we just sat here and we didn't speak. I have two contentions about that, and I could be wrong about both of them. One is that there'd be fewer people watching it, and the other is it would be less fun. You know, why talk about this? Well, there's no reason to talk about this at all. But on the other hand, there's no reason not to. Why not talk about this if some of us find it fun? Some of us, some apparent people find it fun. Why not?
Okay, I do. I do think that anything that's conceivable is part of the consensus conceptual overlay, or commonly thought of as a dream. So anything within a dream, any conclusion, including the flow of separate things, is a misapprehension.
It's got to be a misapprehension, but that's okay. I mean, here is a dream character having a conversation with another dream character, and everything put into words. I mean, we use the word misapprehension if you like. It's a slightly harsh word, but it's okay. Another way of putting it a little bit more neutrally is simply that everything put into language is not the thing itself and is not the process itself. It can't be.
Okay, but that's another
kind of fun, isn't it?
It's
You're
fun.
not enjoying this, Michael?
I am tremendously. It's like, well, I can't describe it. But going back to this idea that anything conceivable is part of the misapprehension, including all ideas about it, assuming that there is an it, and someone to see it, someone separate to see it, that there's no way to what? I've come to that wall.
Because none of that applies. None of what you've just said applies. There's no it. There's no one to see it.
No.
You know, I mean, we are stuffed here. I nearly used a stronger word, but then I thought maybe it's before the watershed, so I won't. We're stuffed here, you know. We've got to be lost with this.
Yeah, I enjoy being lost. I enjoy this. And even this is an objectification of it, this profound unknowingness of never having any idea what's going to happen next, or I'm certainly not sure of the future because memory is plastic. So there's nowhere to settle into anything. There's no hooks. There's no. Yeah. But even that is an idea that's objectified. We're not going to get away from that. In a dream, everything is the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're drinking a cup of tea or taking a sip of water, that's just as much of this as some highfalutin philosophical conversation about life.
Yeah.
It sounds much more impressive if we use the Sanskrit word, doesn't it? And now I'm expecting comments coming in saying, well, you're mispronouncing it.
It's pronounced it. Yeah.
He doesn't know what he's talking about. He can't even pronounce it, the proper Sanskrit word.
Oh, thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
There's a comment here from Earl Gibbs. The books Confession of a Seeker and I Hope You Die Soon are highly recommended.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
and there's William. William.
Yeah. Can I just mention, every time somebody buys one of those books, I think I get something like, 50 or 60 pence, and it mounts up, and pretty soon I've got enough money for a pint of beer. So yeah, I encourage you to buy them. Hello, William. You're mute. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, Richard. It was just a quick question about something you said earlier. You might have been joking when you said about how this meeting's bringing out a particular naughtiness and you might regret it later. Is regret possible when there isn't a sense of being a person?
Anything's possible. Anything is possible. So yes, regret is possible. However, the likelihood of regret diminishing when this is seen is high, and the likelihood of regret continuing as strongly as it did previously is low. But having said that, you see, you've got different characters anyway, so that you may have a character where this isn't seen and they experience no regret anyway, because they're called psychopaths.
Yeah.
And then you've got characters who may be highly, highly, highly neurotic. Well, that doesn't stop the possibility of this being seen. So a very, very, very neurotic character, this is seen. Probably there'll be less neuroticism after that, but there can still be neuroticism, and regret could still arise. It's just less likely to arise. It's less likely to be held so strongly. But you can't say anything. What we're talking about here, it's not about, somebody just mentioned the first book I wrote. There's a section in that book called The Stuff That Happens, and regret about actions arising would be part of that. It's part of the stuff that happens, right? So when this is seen, unless physical death occurs at the same time that this is seen, stuff goes on happening. Stuff still goes on happening. And anything that happened before could still happen. Anything that it's possible to happen could still happen. It is less likely, however, that regret will arise as strongly or as much once this has been seen. And it's more likely that it will pass through and cause less collateral damage on the way.
Mm.
I used to have I haven't used this image for a long time because it's a particularly foul image. I don't know why it came to me one day in a meeting, but it's like, you've got a kind of a room and there's fly paper sticking from the ceiling, and the flies come in and they buzz around and they stick to the fly paper. So that's what it's like to be a person. The inside is very sticky, the thoughts come in, the feelings come in, regret, despair, self-hatred, self-loathing, guilt, let's pile it all in. They come in, they buzz around the room, and then they stick to the fly paper. And eventually the fly paper becomes absolutely encrusted with dead flies. That's a kind of image for a very, very neurotic person. You see, well, seeing this, it's like the fly paper is likely to sort of fall off the hook and disappear somehow magically. So the flies may still come in through the window and they buzz around and they fly out through another window. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a great analogy. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Have we got any more questions out there?
Thank
If
you.
not,
Yep.
Good.
Yeah,
Right.
there are some questions that are coming up here. I'm just going to read them. This one is coming from Facebook. This is a comment. Helpless, hopeless, and meaningless. That's a good one. The trick is to recognize it as a piece instead of something boring.
What was the last bit?
The trick is to recognize it as peace instead of something boring.
Yeah, yeah, or something which is simply, you know, yeah, it's not a again, I don't, it's probably not a good idea to go up to a stranger in a bar and whisper that mantra in their ear. It's not a good idea. No. Wait till you get a sense that there'll be an affinity for it. Maybe practice it on cats and dogs first. Yeah, helpless, hopeless, meaningless. It's wonderful though. If it's kind of got in a certain way, it's so freeing. If there's no hope, we can relax. There's a film with John Cleese in it. I can't remember. I think it's called Clockwise. And he's driving himself frantic, chasing around, trying to, you know, do what he can to get the girl that he desires. And at one point he says, it's not the despair, I can stand the despair, it's the hope I can't stand. I really relate to that. You know, hope is a very cruel master or mistress, depending on your fancy. I mean, as long as there's hope, there's always something you should be doing. Come on, if there's hope, get off your fat ass, get out and do something. Come on, meditate for longer, meditate harder, do more yoga, do more Tai Chi, purify yourself, clean up your diet even more than you're only eating 1 day out of 5. Well, how about trying 1 day out of 8? Come on, that's what hope can be like. You know, despair, well, you know what it's possible to do in despair? Real despair means, you know, there's no sense of anything you can do about your predicament. You know what you can do in despair? Relax. Might as well relax because there's nothing you can do. And I've quoted, I think his name's Keith Dowman so many times, the closest thing to relaxation is the closest thing to Buddhahood here and now. I and other people are asked, what's this like? What is it like, this mysterious, not something, this mysterious nothing that we're talking about? What's it like? There's no way of answering that question. It cannot be answered. But the closest I could get to it is by saying, well, it's not like anything, but it is at least a little bit relaxing. So relaxation is the key to Buddhahood here and now. It may be easier to relax in despair than in hope. It's at least maybe worth thinking about that one.
There's a question here from Roop.
Oh, by the way, that
sorry.
was a method. I really have to say that was not a method before I get lots and lots of angry emails. Yes, sorry, Emerson.
No worries. Roop goes, it is so over already. Where and what is the seeking? And who claims they're to be seeking?
Oh, where and what is the seeking? Well, the where is the... I can't really make sense of the where. You know, seeking is simply a kind of an energy that arises. What is it? It's an I'm going to call it an energy because to call it a feeling is misleading. It's an energy that there's something missing. It's an energy of dissatisfaction. I mean, in a lot of the talks I give, you know, I use the word dissatisfaction a lot. I hear other speakers sometimes using it. It's like, you know, one of the core characteristics of feeling like a separate person is dissatisfaction. You know, it's like there's a kind of nagging feeling that there's something missing. Actually, what's missing, of course, isn't something, it's nothing. It's the fact that nothing has not been apprehended that's missing, and it creates a feeling of dissatisfaction. And now I've forgotten what the question was.
I'll repeat it again. I lost the question. Just a second. It is over already. where and what is the seeking, and who claims there to be seeking?
Yeah, so the seeking is just an inevitable consequence of that feeling of dissatisfaction, which is just what it's like to live with that sense of separation. Yeah, and my memory is really shot. It was a 3-part question. I feel we've dealt with 2 of them. What was the 3rd one again? The very last phrase?
And who claims there to be seeking?
No one. No one claims that. No one claims anything. All claims are made by no one masquerading as someone. So an apparent someone who feels themselves to be separate, even though they don't actually exist, claims the seeking. Which is why when separation drops away, the seeking drops away, because there's no fake person there anymore to claim it. Seeking arises entirely from the fact that there is felt to be a separate person.
And there's a comment here. I get that the mind won't make sense of it. It's just that Tony Parsons describes emotions just appearing apparently in experience. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, if I understand that right. Yeah, we could say yeah, of course, everything simply apparently appears. Everything appears out of nothing and falls away again, including emotions, feelings, these words that are apparently being heard. Yeah, everything. It applies to everything. Yeah, emotions, words, puppy dogs, and pints of beer, they all apparently arise and fall away again. Yeah.
This one is from Blue.
We kind of somehow turn them into something solid. You know, the sense of the separate person turns, everything that arises is fleeting, but the separate person somehow turns it into something that seems very solid. Even an emotion can seem, you know, hugely solid to the separated person.
And this one is from Blue Elephant. Love you. And
Oh.
Ariana would say, all that is ice cream. Just what's appearing. Just what's appearing. Just this. Smiley face.
Okay. If ice cream floats your boat, fine.
And then there's a comment here about the previous conversation from Anders. Okay, yes, mainstream religions are very much duality. It's the esoteric versions that are non-dual. And then Dan said Gnostic Christianity is rife with unity ideas. Did you want to comment on that? Gnostic Christianity is rife with unity ideas.
Absolutely. No, totally. Yes. Yeah, you want to really get the kind of heart of Christianity, you know, absolutely go for the Gnostics. However, having said that, I also want to say it's a bit of a kind of mixed thing, because there's also a huge amount of story in the Gnostic forms of Christianity, and some of those stories are they're so sort of mad that they almost make some of the stories in the actual canon look sensible. It's quite difficult to do that. So yeah, I mean, absolutely at their heart, the Gnostic Gospels absolutely get this, but there's a hell of a lot of junk around that as well. Yeah. Anything else? Any more, Emerson? Is Emerson frozen? Ah. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure what's happening here. I can't see Emerson now, and everything, and the recording has stopped. So I'm not very techie, so I'm not quite sure what's happening. But anyway, should we just go on for a bit longer?
Sit there and chat.
Sit here and chat. Yeah. Is anybody who I mean, actually, we've been going nearly an hour and a half now, so we should probably wrap this up sort of in the next sort of 5 minutes anyway. But are there any last questions from anyone? I can't see anything that's on the written feed, so if there are any last questions, it'll have to be live. And if there aren't, I'm not quite sure what's happened to Emerson there. Maybe it was that. Maybe it was like maybe that was an intervention from God.
It says recording stop. So
Yeah.
So now you can actually tell the truth.
But now I can actually say
you can reveal.
I could reveal
the absolute truth.
Okay, a little message came up there that said Emerson is the host now, but no, as long as it's not still recording. So of course, okay, that was really all a masquerade. The real truth. Okay, I can't say it now. We're recording again. I was going to reveal. Okay,
Sorry about that, Richard. There was a technical difficulty there, but I'm back.
You're back. Okay. Emerson, that was because we weren't being recorded then, I was just about to reveal the real truth that underlies non-duality, but then the recording started again, so I had to stop myself.
Oh no, it's
going
to
to remain
released in the secret meeting.
day. Okay, if anybody wants to know the real truth I was about to reveal, then just send me a brown envelope full of banknotes, and I will write the truth back to you. We've been going for about an hour and a half nearly, haven't we?
Yes,
so
yes. We have about 4 minutes left.
Okay, so maybe if there's one last 4-minute question or two last 2-minute questions. William, you've got your hand up again, yeah?
Yeah, it's not so much a non-duality question. It was just because it's just because you'd said that the live meetings might start again. I was wondering what that's likely. Is there a particular day and time and place where those are held?
Yeah, and we're hoping that in September, I mean, obviously this is very COVID dependent if the regulations don't change, but we're hoping that live meetings may start again they will start again if permitted, hopefully in September.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And the details will all be up on your website.
Yes, indeed. And at the moment, I can't remember the dates, but at the moment, Dawn has got a meeting scheduled for, I think it's the second Friday in September. And she has a meetup group where you can get the details. If you just put in Dawn Garden, non-duality into meetup, you'll get it. And maybe we'll do a joint meeting in the 3rd week of September. That will be a Saturday afternoon meeting in London. And yes, certainly the meetings will be on my website. And if you want to be on my email list, just email me and then you'd get news of any meetings anyway.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll join the email list.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to put in a little advertising break there. I'll send you your £5 later.
Okay, thanks, Richard.
I'll also post the website on the link on this video and also on the chat. Just a moment here. There's a few more questions here. We only have a couple of minutes left, so if anyone wants to question here, there's a... Is there any difference between a character and a cloud?
A character and a cloud?
That's right. That's the question.
I don't think I can answer that question. I nearly misheard it as, is there any difference between a character and a clown? In which case I'd say no, absolutely none. A character and a clown, that's too metaphysical for me. I can't do that one, sorry.
I think that's all the time that we have, Richard. We're nearing 90 minutes. It's like 1 minute left. I just want to thank you everyone for joining the meeting. For the next meetings, Richard's going to do a monthly, so we'll see you next month, Richard. If you want to go to Richard's website, it's RichardSylvester. Is it .com, Richard?
Yeah, RichardSylvester.com.
.com, and you can look at his meetings there. Hopefully, we'll do an online retreat with Richard and possibly Dawn, if that's okay. And thank you so much, everyone. Everyone can unmute yourself and say bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Richard. Nice to see you again. Nice to hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely
Bye.
to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Richard. I'll
Thank
talk to you
Anderson,
soon.
for hosting
Say hello
it.
to Dawn for me.
Yeah, I will.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys.